Delhi receives, on an annual basis, 30 to 40% of pollution from outside. But Delhi also contributes during winter, up to 40% of pollution in Noida. Indian Institute of Tropical Meteorology data is showing that Delhi's own pollution source is 30%, 70% from outside. Now, that means whatever Delhi may do, but Delhi will still remain polluted if you have not dealt with that 70%.
Welcome to ReOrient. I'm Gaurav Gupta.
And I'm Inakshi Sobti. At this time of the year, air pollution is top of mind. We all know how bad Delhi gets in winter. Recently, Delhi's AQI was over 500, a shocking figure. But Bombay, where I live, isn't too far behind. So I think listeners will resonate with this episode as we try to understand the problem.
And we're going to start with the murky end of things by actually talking about just how bad air pollution is. What does it mean when you say 500, right? So Anumita Roy Chaudhary, Executive Director at the Center for Science and Environment, and Suresh Sinha, the Executive Director of Programs at the Clean Air Fund, will give us a picture of the staggering scale of the problem and how it's really a full-blown health crisis. Interestingly, they also tell us about newer ways of looking at pollution management.
Yeah, but if I had to play devil's advocate, this is a conversation that's been going on for years. What's astonishing is that we haven't solved it yet. China had a major problem and they went to war against pollution. What's stopping us?
Very good question. It sits at the heart of this, and it's several things, as we'll hear. We still react to air pollution as if it's an emergency, as opposed to a larger year-round problem. It's not an event that occurs just during wintertime. And narrowing it down to a seasonal problem prevents us, I think, from devising these long-term solutions. Then there's the fragmentation at a governance level. So there's no single source of authority or data. And as a result, there has been failures in implementing pollution control measures.
I wonder whether people truly understand how serious the situation is. Of course, we can see the pollution and feel it in our lungs. But what does it take to truly bring the issue home?
I think this is why data is so crucial. It makes a problem real and provides a measure so that the problem can be fixed. I mean, I spoke to Amit Maurya and Rolly Agarwal of Google AirView, which provides this hyperlocal air quality data on maps. They had some eye-opening things to say that I think listeners would be interested to hear. And it's, I think, maybe even to use, right? Google AirView is something we can all start using. And I also had a conversation with Abid Omar, who started Pakistan Air Quality Initiative to monitor air quality in Pakistan. His is a fascinating story of a citizen-led awareness movement, I think with a lot of commonalities with other parts of Asia, what was experienced in India, what has been experienced in Bangladesh.
I'm trying hard to stay positive. I'm keen to hear about the solutions of how we can learn from countries that are taking measures to tackle the issue.
Well, best to hear from our guests. Anumita, great to have you on the podcast. I want to start with the question, what do you think people get wrong about air pollution?
So what they really get wrong is the whole understanding of the magnitude of the problem and then what needs to be done. So as I was telling you earlier, that it has now become a seasonal conversation, right? So what people think that when air pollution is visible, thick, during winter, during that very difficult inversion period, as if that's what it is. And the moment it disappears and you can't see this anymore, and then it's like out of sight, out of mind. And therefore, for them to make the connection between air pollution and all the deep solutions that are needed across different sectors, that's what they don't get. And another thing that they get very wrong because of this seasonality of the conversation and the visibility of the problem, they think as if just taking some reactive measures, okay, just for a few days, is perhaps going to do the magic, that the air is going to clean up. That if you just say, okay, stop construction for 3 days or don't let trucks come inside, I mean, it's very myopic somewhere. So even though people are beginning to understand that it's a problem that's hurting all of them, and all of them are very deeply affected, but to join the dots of what it takes, That's where the big problem is.
Yeah, and I think this is a human brain problem, right? The problem of large numbers. And I see some of that also in the health effects, right? Because the health effects are non-linear. Is it true to say that just reducing air pollution also by 10% doesn't really do that much because of the way in which the first 20% affects you versus the next 60% versus the next 90%?
Yes, understanding the nature of health impact itself is a very big agenda that now really needs to unfold. So understand that there is a short-term effect, that when you're inhaling something very bad, immediately there will be some trigger effect for your respiratory conditions and cardiac conditions. But breathing toxic air over a period of time, and now we have enough evidence to show that air pollution affects each and every organ of the body. And as a result, because it's very commonsensical actually, that those tiny, tiny particles that go deep into your lungs and then they break through your blood barrier, hit each and every organ. So all the metabolic diseases, what we call the non-communicable diseases today, from diabetes to hypertension, stroke, cancer, going to determine the health outcome. But there is also a logic that if you reduce the exposure, then yes, that will reduce the health risk.
Let me put some numbers behind what Anumita is describing as the health effects of air pollution. In 2023, more than 2 million lives in India were lost to air pollution-related diseases. 9 out of 10 of those deaths were the usual non-communicable diseases such as heart disease, lung cancer, diabetes, and even dementia. All of these things are impacted by air pollution. Globally, air pollution causes around 8 million deaths annually. Again, the largest concentration of that is in the Indo-Gangetic Plain. And while we talk about air pollution outside the home, what's often missing in this whole conversation is air pollution within the home. It's very hard to nail the message that open fire cooking, solid fuel cooking are incredibly bad as they cause particulate matter to build inside the home. And this is harmful, especially for children. These practices are romanticized. These are traditional means of cooking, and there's a belief that food tastes better when cooked in this way. This even goes to the idea of just doing a home barbecue with all that smoke and that coal, and it's seen as giving us better flavor, but it is also causing incredible amounts of harm in terms of the particulate matter it releases. And this is why these behaviors are hard to break. So I went back to Anumita to ask her if she sees a connection between the micro and the macro. If people are not accepting that the air inside their home is in fact polluted when they cook on an open fire, then they're not realizing the level of damage that air does. Is that part of the challenge?
This is turning out to be a very difficult and a complex problem to solve for us right now. So, and increasingly what we are realizing that this household pollution, the whole cooking that is happening, and we know that the cooking not only harming the women and the children and the families, but also that's contributing to the outdoor air pollution. In India, I'm told that the household pollution is contributing as much as 30% of the outdoor air pollution.
Yeah, it ranges between 20 and 30. That's right.
See, the simple solution that we are talking about, that you just have to expand the clean energy access for these households. Now, India has also implemented one of the largest LPG program. And in fact, it has done well. If you really look at that, come out the data that we have seen. But yes, somewhere we are now hitting a roadblock. And clearly what is happening is also the nature of poverty in the country, that even after subsidy, the chronic poverty does not allow them to purchase and sustain the usage of LPG, even at the cost, even at the subsidized cost. So we now have to find other methods of doing it. Maybe, we have to push the rich and the middle class out of LPG into electric cooking, and you free up a lot more LPG for the poor people and those who need. You have to make the economics of this work very well.
Aside from health hazards, air pollution has serious economic fallout, sometimes in ways we understand and ways we sometimes don't. Like, for example, tourists will avoid polluted places, but even IT infrastructure will work less well when there is a lot of pollution in the air. These are things we don't often really see, but are actually huge hidden costs. Shirish and I discussed what air pollution costs the country and whether we should be spending millions to save the multiple billions that dirty air costs us.
So, Gaurav, I think the report that Dalberg did in 2019-2020, which actually very clearly showed what about 95 billion losses to the Indian businesses, right, on an annual basis, the cost of air pollution, right? I think what we're trying to do is, I think that some bit of advocacy is still needed, right, to flip the narrative And instead of saying, this is the economic cost, what would be the economic gains of investment case for investing in air pollution, the kind of climate co-benefit you would get, but also the economic co-benefit or labor productivity or new jobs that see, unless we also need to kind of frame the narrative in the language that would make it much more acceptable, right? I think the biggest concerns across economies is about job security or unemployment. And if we know clearly by investment in clean tech sector, which will also benefit air pollution, investment in sectoral measures and solutions which will have direct benefits on clean air. This can lead towards new employment being created. This can lead towards new investments coming into the sector.
Across the world, there have been many citizens' movements pressuring governments to act to mitigate pollution. In fact, I would argue that some of the biggest leap forwards we've seen in different cities around the world and in different states has been because of citizens' movements. One of the most famous ones was Moms Clean Air Force in the US, which had moms going and knocking on the doors of their local representatives saying that they wanted to see clean air at a time when the US was known for its smog. In India, we're starting to see the shoots of a citizen movement with initiatives like My Right to Breathe. And so I was curious to know, both from Anumita and Shirish, how far we are from a real tipping point of a citizen movement that translates into political action.
Now, here I therefore drop a parallel that, as you gave the example of the US. So in the US, after the Clean Air Act, it has also seen very strong what they call environmental justice movement, where the marginalized communities, near industry, near oil drills, who were affected by this, and they raised voices that they said that while air pollution impacts everyone, but the vulnerable, poor, and the marginalized, they are more disproportionately impacted. Now, that voice, when that started to get stronger, then a lot of amendments were carried out in the Clean Air Act to ensure that all the solutions that are designed, they take into account this disproportionate impact to design the solution. Now, in India, we have not got there yet. In India, there is awareness, but this is more confined to the educated, those who know, those who can access information, those who are exposed to the knowledge. But the vulnerable groups who are deeply affected, the woman burning the chulha, as I said, the poor people, they are not alienated, even though the studies have shown that they are aware of what air pollution is doing to them, but they do not have that wherewithal to negotiate solutions for themselves. And as a result, not only the pollution is impacting them disproportionately, sometimes even the solutions, because there is a lot of gentrification of the solution as well. So when we say, okay, let's just push this industry out of the city, okay, not in my backyard, okay, that is the middle class demand. But when you are doing that, you're not accounting for how the poor people who you are also pushing out with that livelihood source, that whether you taken into account their interest or not.
I think we saw the same thing happen in Poland about 10, 15 years back, right? The high levels of smog events led to movement where civil society came together and asked for clear resolutions to be put in place. And that is now showing effect, right? It takes sometimes these movement building takes time and to show result. I think there are very concerted voices in pockets right now across, I wouldn't just say India alone. I think from the perspective of what we see across Asia for Clean Air Fund's work in different pockets, that this is groups of civil society movements growing slowly and demanding for these to happen. So I think, yes, it's building up that level of advocacy, and policymakers are also listening to it, right? In terms of what the right measures have to be input. So whether it is in Nepal, whether it is in India, in pockets, you can see these movements gaining traction as we move forward.
We have a great example of a people's movement just across the border. Abid Omar founded Pakistan Air Quality Initiative to collect data on air pollution in an effort to influence policy?
The story of air pollution awareness in Pakistan is very much citizen-led. But this is back in 2017 when say the first Lahore High Court case happened, which was, citizen-initiated litigation. The year after, we had a group of mothers called the Scary Ummies, which came together and started lobbying the education department and the health departments of Punjab to take smog as a health emergency. And that led to them closing schools as early as 2019. We had the first school closures happening. And these same mothers went out and conducted hundreds of awareness sessions at not only elite private schools, but at public schools across Punjab. And I think those have been very instrumental in raising awareness to where it is today. But we had a pause by the pandemic. And since the pandemic, we haven't seen another uprising of citizens. So there is interest. People want to do something, but I have yet to see boots on the ground. And by boots on the ground, I don't mean that, they're going out and protesting, but rather doing anything, right? Like, where is the pressure? So somehow we still have to find our feet again. And that is a role for other citizens to now take the mantle forward, because I feel the mothers who were involved then have moved on to other priorities with their lives and, stages of their children.
When I used to talk about air pollution in India, people would often cite China, would often say, hey, at least we're not as bad as Beijing. But our neighbor, which has been dealing with an air pollution crisis for a long time, has actually now started to deal with it quite effectively. Beijing air pollution levels have come down significantly from their highs 10 years back. What can we learn from Beijing and other cities, countries? I asked Anumita to explain China's approach to the problem.
Some of the key drivers of this change has been that where you have a very strong regulatory framework with the regulatory target and a strong compliance framework. Now that's the fundamental. And like, for instance, in Beijing, so when they said initiated that we are going to reduce pollution by 25% in 5 years, okay, then based on that target, they have then implemented their action plan in such a way that, and it's very interesting the way they did it. One, the multi-sector action was designed for both scale and speed, okay, as well as the regional approach, which we just talked about. So they did not confine the action only within the boundaries of Beijing, but they took 3 contiguous provinces. Okay. So therefore, everything that was done for Beijing was done across all the 3 provinces. And the scale of the change. So they had gone after, say, for instance, coal for heating, for industrial usage. In each sector, the scale of implementation has been massive. And that's what had made the difference. So instead of, they have actually overreached their target of 25% and they've actually reduced it by 40%. Now, similarly, in US, they also provide targets based on the non-attainment status of the state. And there the teeth is that the federal funds that are given to the states, if they fail to meet the target, then the federal grants can be cut. Okay, so there is this penal provision that also drives. So they've all figured out different regulatory methods in doing that. Now, in India, it's very interesting. We have seen some good reforms. So if you look at the National Clean Air Program, they've also given a target. They've said 40% reduction by 2026. They've also given performance-linked funding. They are saying, so more than 10,000 crore have already been sanctioned and it's come to reduce pollution in about 42 million plus cities. Now, where is the problem? The problem is mainly with the design of the solution, scope of the solution. So when you look recently, when we did the analysis, so of almost 10,000 crore that has been spent to clean up the air in these 42 cities, 64% of that has gone only for dust control, which is potholes or road sweeping, right? But if you look at how much they have spent to reduce emissions from industry, power plant, from transport, in fact, less than 1% of the funding has gone for industrial pollution control, right? So as I said, that first you're making an action plan. So these are all based on action plans, which are multi-sector, which have said what you need to do in each sector. But when it comes to doing it, then there is no clear system of defining the scope of all the priority strategies across all sectors. And then you kind of reduce it to only what you do, which is a business as usual for a department. Now we are working so closely with the cities and seeing that how they are implementing and so forth. But even after the policies define what they need to do, even after Central Pollution Control Board give them the indicators around which the strategy needs to be designed. But when it comes to doing it, it doesn't happen like that. Lot of things that they need to do just don't happen. So now, for instance, let's say vehicular pollution. Now, in that, there are many indicators that you need to phase out old vehicles, you need to improve your technology, you need to bring in electric vehicles, you need to do public transport, walking, cycling, parking restraint. But when you look at what they've actually done, then maybe it's just one or two things that they have done. They may have just phased out a few vehicles, they may have bought few buses, but it is not designed to build the scale of the solution for what it takes to make the difference. And they have budget and resources with it.
Sometimes I see it in both directions. Sometimes people are like, well, we've got bad air because of what's going on in Delhi. And then others who are saying, we've got bad air because of everybody else and not us, right? It's all imported. It's all because of what's happening with the farmers in Punjab. And so, I think this feels like another aspect that people can't get their hands around, which is like who to blame. And the fact that there is quite a complex weather pattern conversation. Is there something about the Indo-Gangetic Plains cities? Because it does stretch all the way to Pakistan. There are many cities there that are experiencing this challenge, and there are multiple cities across North India. What is it about that sort of geography that is causing these issues? Or is it just about the localized urban development decisions?
Absolutely. Now, this is very important for us to understand. And here I will answer this question in a little different way. You know that in India, Delhi has been fighting the air pollution battle for now almost more than 20 years. Okay. With CNG, phasing out old vehicles, stopping all coal power plants, bringing natural gas to its industry, stopping trucks. A lot has actually happened in Delhi. Okay. And it's very interesting if you look at the long term trend that the overall trend in Delhi is actually downward. And very interesting thing is that because all the action taken so far have targeted diesel and coal, essentially, that today there is now data available to show you that how diesel consumption has gone down dramatically in this city. Even share of diesel cars have dramatically reduced and coal consumption is nil. Now the question is that yet Delhi is suffering from pollution levels where we need another 60% reduction to meet the clean air standards. And I'm telling you that the new science is telling us that Delhi cannot become a green island in the Indo-Gangetic Plain, okay, just by taking action within the boundaries of Delhi. Because of the movement of air, air pollution does not follow administrative or any political boundary, okay, it goes between boundary. And if air is blowing, so the pollution is also blowing with it. Right? Now we have data. So if you take the source apportionment data for Delhi, it shows that Delhi receives on an annual basis about 30 to 40% of pollution from outside. But Delhi also contributes during winter up to 40% of pollution in Noida. So it is receiving, but I'm also contributing. And during winter, now Indian Institute of Tropical Meteorology data is showing that Delhi's own pollution source is 30%, 70% from outside. Now, that means whatever Delhi may do, but Delhi will still remain polluted if you have not dealt with that 70%. This, therefore, is now taking us towards the new approaches to air quality management, which they call regional airshed-based management. Essentially now, in fact, World Bank and others, they've started to delineate air sheds. This is the common air mass, which have common meteorology, climatic parameters, and so they can delineate that within the country and also at a South Asia level. Okay, so now they have done that. But now the question is that what does it mean to operationalize a regional airshed, air quality management? Now we have seen examples in the US, where in the part of the Clean Air Act, they establish the responsibility for the upwind polluters, for the downwind air quality, right? So when we say we are making clean air action plan, we also have to take into account that how much of my sources are contributing to the downwind side of another state. So now under the National Clean Air Program, they are now talking about the Indo-Gangetic Plain, and they're looking at the coordinated action amongst 7 states of Indo-Gangetic Plain so that they all develop their common strategies to address. But let's see how that will take off. But the reality is, if we do not deal with it, then we are in deep problem. So not only for the continuous sources of pollution, but as you also said, the episodic problem as well. And the episodic problem is the crop burning, which you said, Punjab. So the crop burning, so that's seasonal. That happens for just about a month. And its contribution to Delhi's air quality will be highly variable, depending on the speed and the direction of the air. But we have to deal with it because the whole airshed is getting fouled around that time. So these are the strategies that will have to be part of the next generation action.
The Indo-Gangetic airshed is shared by India's neighbors. And so in many ways, it acts as a natural laboratory for us to be thinking about the solutions that might work in one place and how they could be applied elsewhere. Right now, all countries within that airshed have quite differing responses to air pollution. Shurish told me about what Dhaka is doing that we should be, in fact, learning from.
I'll give you an example of brick kilns in Bangladesh. There's been significant investment that has gone both on the research side as well as piloting and testing new processes to be introduced or cleaner brick making processes, right? Including shifting away from the traditional technologies to more advanced one. And we've seen that the state of Bihar has also gone through a very similar process of, transition in the brick kilns. So there is a lack of cross-learning that is naturally happening because of the funding that is going into the region or the other programs in the region. And I think it's a good case is, last year, the World Bank has obviously been taking a lot of interest in the entire Indo-Gangetic Plain, the Hindu Kush Himalayas and the foothills. And we were all together, and it's an annual convening that now happens where the neighboring, all the countries were present. And there was a lot of formal exchange that started to happen on sharing of data, sharing of lessons learned, experiences. Financing is a common element that each of these countries need essentially to move forward. So I think the process is started to happen in South Asia. It's not an easy region for regional cooperation and knowledge exchange, etc., to happen. Whereas if you draw a parallel to Southeast Asia, the ASEAN agreement that is already in place, that sharing of knowledge experience is moving much faster there, right? We also work through Clean Air Fund has a small project working with NCAP there's a regional platform on air pollution, which is a knowledge exchange platform, which is looking at Asia Pacific as a basis. So I think it's that sharing of experiences has started to happen now. It's more, you could say, visible in certain geographies and less in certain areas, but that level of cooperation is happening now.
But I think for something like that to succeed, maybe to come back to something you've been driving up, I guess, when you think about air pollution, so let's go back up to the macroeconomic level of it's an airshed, it's multiple jurisdictions, it's cities, it's different countries and so forth. Is there a grand bargain here of financing? Like, do you ever see a financing of an airshed? Because in a way, when you say, look, it is much more economically sensible to think about that single thing and then think about, okay, therefore we need not a repeat of the same things, but for us to think about who does what. Do you think there is a future in which we might finance the cleanup of an airshed as a single thing? Or do you think it's always going to be the political economy is going to be such that Delhi is going to need to get its $1 billion to do what it needs to do, and Karachi needs it, and Dhaka needs something else, and so forth?
I mean, in a sense, if you look at the current effort that the bank is trying to do with the countries around the South Asia, is going for an airshed level financing, right? So that's the model. And there is a good example of what ADB did in the past in China, right? The Hebei province, which was a fairly large regional airshed approach in a sense to look at transformation to come. So I think it's doable. It's not that it's not doable. Now, whether it will possible to do it transboundary international boundaries or whether it is even practical to just keep it within even within the national boundaries, it's not going to be easy, right? In terms of the level of preparedness of different states in India to go for an airshed level approach of financing is not going to be equally easy, right? So I think it's practically, it's possible. I think it's the administrative levels of creating that space is going to be far more challenging.
Let's bring this down to microeconomics, right? So when you had a similar conversation of carbon, there's a lot of private sector companies that are like, okay, this is my business model for addressing the carbon issue. And clearly renewable energy is the biggest, but when it comes to pollution, right, or air pollution, other than like clean cooking and what we've already discussed, EVs and renewable energy, which again, renewable energy and EV is still, it's not air pollution that's generally the driving sort of financing aspect. Maybe obviously with clean cooking, yes.
I think that's generally true. Asia is growing, so it will have its own challenges of growth aspiration as well as the environmental protection side. If you really look at the sectors, then obviously transport sector, there's a huge opportunity around the value chain that can be built across the subsectors and the various vehicle segments, right? Because the tailpipe emission is a major source of air pollution for the NOx essentially to come out. I think one sector that we're trying to build much more evidence around it is where new opportunities will open up. And there is a direct engagement with employment, with or with job creation, is the micro and small and medium enterprises. Right. If you look at the entire IGP of the Indian side of the Indo-Gangetic Plain, right from Punjab all the way up to West Bengal, that's what those continuous states cover. This is very large concentration of MSME sectors. Different
Here's where, for
clusters
example,
that
brick
exist,
kilns
right?
also come in, right? Lots of
Brick kiln
small
comes in,
operators.
metallurgical industry, foundry unit. So a large number of small scale industries are in these areas where work has been happening on energy efficiency, process efficiency improvement. But I think the large scale transformation of changing fuels, shifting towards cleaner fuel for production processes or changing production process itself is going to be a huge economic opportunity, huge investment opportunity. It's a sector which has traditionally never got the scale of investment leading towards this modernization, right? Well, a lot of them are family-owned, individual-owned units, very difficult to go to markets for borrowing. So I think that sector can bring a lot of transformation, and the gains would be not just improving the local air pollution environment, but also of the whole air shed in terms of as the transboundary air basically moves, right? So I think that is a sector where I do believe as we move forward, just like we have seen investment go into renewable energy in the past, investment has gone into a transport sector, right? Today, private sector investment into electric mobility is a very natural investment, right? Because the right policy frameworks, etc., which support. It will peak, but then new policies will come and then the new set of investments will happen. I think the next big sector intervention, especially the micro, small, and medium enterprises, which are the backbone of the economy, right?
Yeah.
It provides employment.
Especially of the employment, right? It's 80%
Yeah,
of the
especially.
employment.
So I think that is one sector that needs a big push and big focus. Okay, so I was giving example was that, like, say, there's a strong emphasis on going for common boilers, right? For small scale industries, which would also mean that industries would have to move out of their current locations into these common facilities. Very same challenge as is there in the cook stores, right? Transition. This is going to happen. So we need to find a mix of both behavioral shift in how these units operate and function, also ensuring that, sometimes they feel that their products that they manufacture are kind of copyright, or need to be protected, cannot be shared with others. We have seen this transition to be a bit more challenging in many industrial sectors. So I think some innovation is needed on the technology side, some innovation needed on the process side, plus creating new investment mechanism which will drive these.
Yeah, you're describing a little bit of a cluster model as well, which also then makes the financing a bit easier. I mean, this is where China has really nailed it.
But
right?
I think the biggest hindrance comes in terms of transforming them into implementation, enforcement, right? I think those are the challenges that we still have to overcome.
So something I've seen that shifts some of these paradigms is a technological innovation that suddenly, sometimes you get a technological innovation that says, oh, I can now pinpoint who's doing the pollution, where before you could kind of get away. And then suddenly that creates an awakening. Other times it's some incredible technology that just makes something fundamentally so much cheaper. With both AI as well, where there's I've seen a lot of interesting arguments about AI's role in climate change and efficiency, but also other innovations that you're seeing. How much for you is also that side of the equation something that you're focused on or expecting to deliver some results, that there is some big step changes in innovation that could be transformative? And what might those be, even if it's not completely evident today?
So one of the things that we are currently, we have a program with IIT Kanpur in India, which is looking at multiple things, including indigenous manufacturing of production of low-cost sensors. The same center of IIT has also now become the Government of India's Center of Excellence on AI for cities, right? And therefore, they are able to now link both their capabilities of monitoring through low-cost sensors and AI and apply that in terms of creating much more informed choices for policymakers to know exactly where let's say, local pollution hotspot monitoring, right? Right now, the model has been that you install sensors or you have mobile sensors which will go and monitor, right? With the combination of AI and the data is allowing them to generate much more clear analysis, which will tell which are the clear hotspot regions, which can therefore be where action needs to essentially happen.
Sometimes solutions come from unexpected quarters, and I wonder whether tech has a role to play. For instance, there's data that shows that people started spending less time in their cars after the introduction of Google and Apple Maps. If your route is better mapped, you're likely to spend less time idling in a traffic jam and therefore causing less pollution and, in fact, taking in less pollution. With this in mind, I spoke to Amit Maurya and Roli Agarwal about their work at Google AirView. Amit, tell us about how AirView makes us look at cities differently.
So the idea for AirView Plus really comes from a fundamental principle. You can't fix what you can't measure, right? So most of the cities, if you see, they are currently struggling with the major problem of not having the enough data sources to take informed decision. And that is what the critical insight for us to find a way to provide this hyperlocal air quality data. And AirView Plus is a Google initiative that aims to establish cost-effective, hyperlocal, and scalable air quality monitoring to raise awareness about air quality and enable action on climate using Google AI. And one of the important part, Gaurav, I want to double down on it, that even though there are air quality monitoring infrastructure is available at a city level, but it is just like, right, and those gives you air quality information at a city-wide level. But it is just like having a thermometer, which gives you an average temperature of a city, but doesn't tell you that your neighbor is on fire. And that's where this hyperlocal air quality information becomes much more critical.
Data in the air pollution space is highly politicized. I've spoken to people in different parts of South Asia in very similar stories. Whenever the data starts to look bad, people look bad. And then it becomes a bit of a challenge. What is your source of hyperlocal data?
Yeah, so then you touched upon a very important point, Gaurav. Unfortunately, we have made the data transparency as a stigma for cities. Actually, it is the more, the transparency you bring into the air quality, the more solution you will see automatically will come from, from the ground up. For us, in order to ensure that we have a good wide coverage, we identified where are the currently the air quality data gaps are there in India. Right. So government has already installed, and they have done a phenomenal job of installing 800 plus sensors all across India. But there were pockets, there were cities where there was no air quality monitoring infrastructure in place. We identified those places and put in these sensors provided by the local startups to measure the air quality. So the way the Google AI-powered air quality models works is that we have on-ground sensors, right? We take air quality data from these on-ground sensors, and then on top of it, it is further getting integrated with your satellite imagery. It get integrated with the weather patterns. It get integrated with the fire-related, the events. And by combining all these three together, we build an modeled air quality layer, which you currently see on Google Maps. So today, if you go on Google Maps and open up the air quality layer for India, you can find that beautiful air quality layer on top of it, which allows users to see the air quality in their neighborhood at a resolution of 500 meter by 500 meter.
I asked Abid a similar question. How does he source data? Who are the major producers of pollution? And what did he have to go through to get that data published?
So we did what's called a tier 1 or tier 2 emissions inventory, which is essentially a desk study. So it is supplemented by our monitoring network, which is nationwide with 150 monitors. And by the end of this year, that should be double. But also, we get government statistical data on number of registered and on-road vehicles in each airshed that we've defined, number and type of industries, which is kind of what we had to also map ourselves. You can get an idea of what the industries are, but to gauge, is it a textile industry? Is it a steel mill? Is it a cement plant? And then accordingly, how big is it? So how many emissions it would be generating? So the first step is always just a desk study of figuring out what is the available data, which is what we've done. The next step that we hope to do, which has to be in coordination with the government, where you do on-ground surveys. And also what is very much missing in Pakistan is things like chemical speciation studies, because we can model what is coming out of this desk study, and we can say, okay, based on certain modeling criteria applicable with this region, we know that a coal power plant is giving out so much sulfur dioxide pollution, and there's so much particulate matter pollution coming from these industries and these sectors. But what's next is that exactly what is that those particles made of, right? Like in a place like Karachi, is it sea salt? Is it dust coming from Balochistan and Middle East and North Africa? So one can really identify and quantify those, which then gives you like the baseline of, exactly where you should target and, what reduction expectation you should have. So that's in a nutshell what we're trying to do. We're trying to build the evidence base to have effective policy.
So collecting good data is only as useful as people actually using it. And so I wanted to go back to Rolly Agarwal and the Google AirView team to ask if all that interesting data that they're collecting, who's using it, are new companies actually forming on the basis of the data that Google is putting out?
I don't think any one entity can solve for it. And we are very conscious that even though, AirView Plus with the sensor technology provides a really good foundation to understand and get the numbers, on its own, it's not going to be enough, right? So that's really where the point that you're making on partnerships becomes really important. And what our team did really there was go out and build these partnerships, right? Which then helped the project, one, like become technologically grounded, if I use that word, right? Credible, because now it is grounded almost in the local ecosystem. It has been worked upon by local researchers. Amit and team have collaborated with local city bodies, right, to look at what they are seeing, what we are seeing. So it's really been, partnerships really have been core.
And maybe if you can give an example, one example of an interesting startup partnership, just so I think the audience can feel what is that sort of innovation that's happening, and maybe a government or a local government partnership.
So we started working with the local startups, Orashore and Respiratory Living Sciences, and they are the one who are bringing this sensor technology to India. And they are the one who are deploying the sensors and maintaining it over a longer period of time. Having said that, the second part was the credibility in the air quality data, because there has been attempt being made to deploy economical air quality sensors and try to measure the air quality and take action using that information. But many of the times, the accuracy was an issue. So that's where we bring in the local researchers, partners likes of C-Steps, IIT Delhi, IIT Hyderabad. As a third party, they validated all those sensors data which is coming in from the AirView Plus sensor network and confirmed that, yeah, it is meeting the threshold. So that was the second, right, the partnership angle. Then the third one is the final city administrators. So we identified and we worked with the initial cities who are interested and who are ready to take, to take this journey with us. And they are the one who use this data to take informed decision. And I can give you a few examples likes of Chennai, Chhatrapati Sambhaji Nagar, and Navi Mumbai. These cities were able to improve the air quality in their cities by identifying the pollution hotspots and then seeing a considerable improvement in air quality during the winter season. So that's the way, the overall partnership model worked. And it's still, we are still building upon it.
I would also like to share that, once the air quality layer was launched on maps, right, that's like one way to bring this information to the public. But there is also work that we do from an enterprise perspective, right? So Google Maps can also be used by enterprise players, right, to show different kinds of solutions, right, that are targeted to their use case. So now imagine what happens if the air quality information could sit within different scenarios, right? One of them I think you all were talking about earlier. So think education. Right? If you're an education institute, entity, website, being able to use the air quality information in that setup, or health, fitness, talk about real estate, right? Now you're starting to marry different kinds of data sets And that becomes magical. That is where the action can start happening in a more, I would say, accelerated way.
Amit, when you were building this product, right, ultimately your product is built within a framework of what data is available and the laws of the land. And I guess if you had a magic wand and said, wow, I wish someone had given us access to this data, or I wish we weren't restricted, what is that thing that would sort of, you think, unlock a lot of even more value around what could be built?
Very interesting question for sure, Gaurav. So still, I would say that the air quality layer is not available for all the countries, right? On our maps, the air quality layer is only available wherever we have access to the data and where regulators are open to share that data with us. So that is the point number one, that we can make this information available for everyone, provided this information is also being shared with us and with others, right? Because air quality is a common good, right? And the major problem that we are seeing with the air quality is the common goods issue, where it is everyone's problem, but not everyone is trying to solve for it, right? And whosoever trying to solve for it is sort of in effects right now because of the various reasons. So the first thing is making or having access to this information is definitely going to help us scale this product and making this information available for everyone. The second one is having the standard approach of measuring the air quality. Every country uses their own air quality index, which varies substantially from Singapore to Pakistan to India to Bangladesh. I think we will require some sort of an standardization, because that the air we breathe and the particulate matters to the gaseous matters which are there in it is definitely going to impact the health of the people, which is directly or indirectly going to impact the health and the productivity of the people.
I've often wondered if you were to take a really long-term view, right? And if you enabled, how do I say this, like a personal report card, right? Which is something which tells me as a citizen, me as a business, right? Me as whatever entity I may be. How am I, contributing to the situation at hand, right? And therefore, what is it that I can do to prevent that? So this, of course, is the macro, but also like individual action, right? That ocean is made up of every single drop that exists in it. So if I think about a wish list personally, just as a, man on the woman on the street, right? I sometimes really wish that I had that crystal, ball which told me how me, my family, my neighborhood, is contributing to this problem. And therefore, then what is it that we need to do? So again, like, how do you create that inspiration and therefore action at an individual level? I would love for something to happen there. There is, on that thought, there are a bunch of things that we are doing, right, from a Google Maps perspective, besides AirView Plus, which goes somewhat in that direction, Gaurav. So I'd like to mention some of them. So electric vehicles, and the whole move to EV, right? One of the deterrents we keep hearing about is range anxiety, right? What we are doing is starting to help a little bit with that by making charging stations more discoverable, okay? So what that means is we are again partnering with charging station operators, anybody who's got like really a charger out there, to put that on the map. So when you're navigating around your city, you know exactly where these charging stations are going to be, right? It's not going to solve anything today, but solutions like this add up.
That's a great wish list and a fantastic discussion. Thank you.
Gaurav, what's your takeaway from the conversation?
I think my one takeaway is this needs to become a serious political issue. It cannot stay a technocratic issue. People need to now start losing jobs if they don't fix it. And I think that requires all of us to create a bit of a groundswell. That's a political groundswell. But Inakshi, this is a visceral thing. You were experiencing this in Bombay, and I'm curious, what's your one takeaway from listening to our guests?
So I wear a very strong execution hat, and I feel whether it's a citizen with a sensor, a policymaker, a tech innovator, everyone has a role to play. And the real power lies in connection, connecting ideas, data, action to solve this problem.
Amazing.
In our next episode, we dive into another contemporary issue, AI, its harms and benefits. We'll be speaking to lawyer and digital rights advocate Gaurav Gupta, Anshul Tiwari, the founder of the online platform Youth Ki Awaaz, Urvashi Aneja, the founder of the think tank Digital Futures Lab, Reid Hoffman, the founder of LinkedIn, and Eric Wang, the founder of Rhino Shield.